Hello world, and thank you for being here and watching today. Welcome to today's edition of Sacred Earth Essentials. As many of you know, I'm switching things up around here and expanding my offerings and the way in which I deliver these offerings. So here on Sacred Earth Essentials, I bring to you conversations both on YouTube, Instagram, as well as on my just beginning podcast about humanity, the sacred, and the earth. So we talk a lot about soul and soil from around the world. And so today I want to share the good news with you of some other people around the world who are really putting in a lot of hard work into regenerative farming practices, biodynamic agriculture, and taking care of the earth and the community, both in a physical and a spiritual sense. So first of all, I wanted to mention the Karmapa. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of the Karmapa before. The Karmapa is a leader in the Kagyu lineage tradition, which is a Buddhist practice. And he's, I think, about only a year younger than I am, so he's 36 years old. And you can Google it and learn more detail. I first was introduced to his teachings and that school of Buddhism 12 years ago, I believe. I was introduced to him through first seeing a picture of him in a friend's room and asking about him and feeling drawn to the energy and always being a seeker of spiritual truths and relationships, deep relationships with both people, the earth, and Great Spirit. And so then that led me to, I met a couple that live here in Vermont who are also practitioners or students or followers of the Karmapa. And then I was, blessed with being able to learn more about him and his teachings. And at one point was gifted the biggest set of prayer beads I've ever seen. They were, I think, wooden and more of an oval shape with the dorje and the bell on the end, I believe. And I carried those with me for a long time. And now I'm not, to my knowledge, officially initiated in any specific practice, but part of my goal in this lifetime as a human has been to be able to find the common good in everyone and in everything as much as possible, and to be able to share that common ground, that higher ground, and find more ways to promote peace and love and happiness and sustainable living in a respectful, sacred manner on this planet, right? And so at one point, here's a funny story. I talk about, and in one of my businesses, Wild Wellness, there's a main focus on helping women to get back in tune with their intuition and being able to live from an authenticated, heartfelt life where they are free to follow their yearnings with confidence instead of with shame. And one may call that, taking a walk in your wild side and regaining those powerful parts of ourselves as people that may have been shamed or discouraged in the past. And so I've had a lot of interesting, I suppose you could call them spiritual experiences in my life. And one of these, I will tell you briefly before I move on to more of the soil part of this conversation. I was driving back from visiting my mom in Pennsylvania when my son was, it was around 2016 or 2017, and he could walk, and so I just had this feeling of, I want to go to Karmapa in New York. I don't know why, but I want to stop there on my way back to Vermont. I just felt this really strong pull to go there. So I started going in that direction, and I'm like, well, if I go now from where I am on the journey, I'll get there about sunrise, And, even if no one's there and I can't go in, I can take a hike up the hill to the water tower. And that would be a great thing for Liam and I to do on our way back to Vermont. And I was very tired. It was late at night, probably around 2 a.m. And I thought to myself, I'm going to do the safe thing. I have Liam in the car. I'm going to pull over and I'm going to take a nap. And then after I take a nap, I'll go. So something told me, like, no, you can make it. Just trust and keep driving. But I didn't. I took a nap instead. And so then when I got there, I discovered that the Karmapa was actually there that morning. And my 2 friends that I had learned about him from were also there. And had I gone to the parking lot where I was intended, where I was pulled to go, I would have been there at the perfect time for when he was entering into Karma. And I just kicked myself in the behind for that one, And so I ended up back in Vermont and found out that he was giving an empowerment ceremony in that region in New York coming up that weekend. So I ended up going back to sit in the audience and participate in that level of the ceremony. So that was a blessing to be in his presence. And I walked up in the back at one point just to because I had Liam with me and was feeling pulled to do that. And I ended up in the end of the line of the people who were going up to receive this white empowerment or blessing from the Karmapa. And I had a crystal heart that I wanted to give to him. And I'm like, well, maybe I'll just, I bet I could just get in the back of the line. And everyone was looking at me like I had belonged there. And I was like, I bet I could just get in the line and walk right up and give him this heart. And what a blessing. But I didn't. Again, I was like, no, that's rude, Stephanie. That's not respectful or honest. And so I didn't. But I was just so pleased to be in his presence and to get to learn about that tradition in this lifetime, and to see how I can share those teachings the best as possible, even if it's just through essence or through positive intent from, as a Westerner, as a white lady. We'll just say it that way, right? And so that was one of my experiences around that. And I just was listening to him give a teaching this morning on Facebook. You can find him on Facebook as well. And he's also authored some books, which I recommend. I have one of them downstairs, and one of the things he talks about is letting the moon hold his love. So we can look to all these different cultures throughout the world for common threads and to be able to learn just about how to be better as individuals and as a society, and to find that common higher ground and live at those higher vibrations. Because again, when we lift others, we lift ourselves, and it benefits everyone. So it's like a win all, right? Instead of creating waves of conflict. And so one of the things that he was discussing was the importance of sharing the teachings, the importance of writing about the teachings, the importance of not losing those teachings. And he also discussed the importance, the necessity, and the reality of being able to help other practices, other groups through those traditions and practices. That it doesn't have to just be in one particular area, that we're able to all work together from different religions or spiritual practices and find common ground. And we have common ground, the earth, right? One earth, there's only one earth, and so we can come at it from a place of one love and find a way to work together for the greatest good of all beings, rather than like a bunch of babies fighting. Just like a bunch of little kids fighting in the playground, except it has dire consequences. It's like not funny, right? So it's like telling certain people to grow up, I suppose, on that global level. and that conflicts can be resolved without displacing millions of people or killing people. And so that's, part of the teaching, and the relationship as well with the earth. And so that leads me into the next part of this conversation, the more soil-based conversation that also has a spiritual perspective imbued in it. And that is from a course that I'm taking called The Whole Garden with Soule from Havana Botanicals, and she's out of Maine. And she's another one of the beautiful, blessed herbal teachers, super gentle soul. She's one of the most calming people to listen to and be around. And she's been doing herbalism, I probably as long as I've been alive as well, if not lifetimes. And I've had the honor of learning from her in her online course last year, as well as her online course this year, and through workshops at the Women's New England Herbal Conference that's held in New Hampshire. And I don't know if I've taken an actual class with her at the International Herb Symposium, but I'm pretty sure she usually goes to those as well. And so I'm here on these social media platforms to not just promote myself, but also to really promote all of these people that I've learned from, that I'm learning from now, all these beautiful organizations that are working together for the whole as best as possible. And there are people in this field who are experts, whereas, I'm a student for life and will share at the level at which, I'm at, and continue with that process as we grow, as the world heals. It's a new version of an earth-based play where we all win, right? And the earth is actually a better place. And so part of that comes in sharing these teachings, and then they go to where they need to go, and we need, myself included, to implement them and embody them. And so through one of these trainings with Soule, The Whole Garden, we're learning a lot right now about soil. And I did mention having attended the Regenerative Cannabis Conference in Maine this past weekend, where I learned a lot about different natural farming methods as well. And this particular 6-week course with Deb goes into the soil systems, the soil health, the biodynamic calendar, the teachings of Rudolf Steiner and many other experts in this field about how to create that sacred, healthy soil in your own backyard, and then how to also be able to spread those teachings to other people. Because as many of us know, the commerce culture has been really dominated by that, get the dollar kind of thing for a long time. And I'm not saying that money's not fun, that it doesn't have value. I love Ian Levensant's acronym, my own natural energy yield. Money can be a tool of the divine, and it is a reflection of the flow of energy and creativity and ingenuity and sacredness, really, because our ideas and our work and our creations are all coming from the same one source, right? So creating that abundance culture, and this is part of my offering to that collective pot, is to spread the knowledge and to support the people that I've learned from, to support my teachers, to support my friends, and to spread the word like seeds in the wind, right? Like dandelions in the wind. Those mother lovers, right? Stop spraying them with your whatever, folks in the suburbs, in the cities. Like, I grew up in Moon Township, Pennsylvania, for those of you that don't know. And I think I remember one year with my mom out near the mailbox at the end of the cul-de-sac, her having a bottle and trying to kill the dandelions. And at one point, I don't remember if it was her or my dad. I love stories, by the way, and I'll tell a lot of them. And, we just quit spraying them. They were like, this is it's stupid. Like, it's a flower. It's not doing anything. It's just trying to live its life. And lo and behold, years later, discovering herbalism, I find out that it has this huge, rich history of being a food and a medicine, and even turned into a fermented alcoholic beverage. And so this beautiful plant that has physical, medicinal properties, nutritional, vibrancy, and a great spiritual symbolism or archetype for confidence and strength and resilience and wildness, and being nutritive at the same time, and how beautiful it is to create a dandelion wreath. So just that beauty and that strength in a plant. And so I'm mentioning that because these pesticides and fungicides and really harsh chemicals, even chemical fertilizers that humans, maybe not you, but the mass-produced farming for the most of, I don't know how, at least the past 50 years, right, have been soaking the earth in these chemicals. And so if you compare the earth to like your body, for example, do you want to soak your body in healthy, nutritive, delicious juiciness? Or do you want to soak your body in stuff that's bad for you, that's going to strip you of your minerals and your life and your vibrancy and your natural beauty and your natural scientifically proven biome? That's why when we've read articles about playing with dirt and how getting your hands in the dirt is so helpful, even with fighting depression, because you're getting those microbes into your body, which is another thing that we learned about at the conference this weekend, with the indigenous microbials and the inputs, and that our spiritual bread is sliced thin. Well, so is our nutritive bread, right? And so is our nutrition, and it's affecting humanity on a lot of different levels. And here we have these beautiful practices that are, ancient, time-honored, and now supported by science, that we can implement, right? And so to any of you big agricultural CEOs that watch my show, thanks for being here, political leaders or whatever. And if you happen to have the opportunity to implement like the Korean natural farming practices, the Rudolf Steiner, the biodynamic practices, and anything that's going to be healthy for your soil is going to improve the quality of your product. It's going to allow for you to produce on that land in a way that's better for the plants, for the land, for your business, for humanity. Like, there's a way to continue your lucrative abundance while also creating health in the world instead of disease, right? And then if you believe in karma or not, or God, like, let's just say you do, doesn't hurt, right? Like, I mean, I'm just trying to, like, I guess, I don't know, some people will probably say this is bad, but selling that altruism, selling this idea that sacred, having reverence and respect for the planet and life is essential, even in business, and that you can still run a successful, lucrative business that's also healthy. One of the things that I learned from my dad growing up in his tool business was, you take care of your employees like their family, and they're gonna stay, and they're gonna be happy, and they're gonna do a better job, and they're gonna be loyal, and you're doing good for them, and that's just what you do, right? And same with the customers, that you, to the most degree possible, treat the customers like family, and that you're serving them. You're not just selling them, garbage and sending them on their way and laughing at them as the product or service doesn't work, right? It's not about cultivating empty abundance. It's about like cultivating, planting seeds in the lives of other people that will proliferate. And again, that's abundance consciousness versus scarcity consciousness, which is the belief that there's not enough to go around, versus abundance consciousness, which is the belief that there's more than enough for everybody, right? But that also requires that we live in that place of belief and faith and action. And I know I'm guilty of not always following through, being afraid, putting the cat food can in the garbage can. I've done that, like not doing my yoga routine, not meditating, not trusting other people or myself. And I think part of this process of combining soil and soul is seeing that relationship and seeing that chain and seeing the weight of the little things, like the impact of the little things that we can do in our lives for ourselves and other people, right? So sound soothes me. And so through the training that we were having last night with Deb in the whole garden, the guest speaker, which I'm still in the middle of watching this, but it's so exciting that I wanted to share about it. The guest speaker's name is Megan Durney, and she's in New York, and she seems to me like a very wise and hardworking soul that's put a lot of time and effort into her practices and into her work with the earth and elderlies and people, and being of service, and also being in agriculture, which is part of the point of Sacred Earth Essentials. And by the way, I had felt so alone for so long in my desire, my yearning to combine my practices of psychology with my practices with the plants, with my experiences and practices in meditation and yoga, and as a mom, and as a a thriver, someone who's experienced different types of trauma and mental health struggles, like being able to share my whole self, the whole garden of my soul with the world, not just bits and pieces, right? And that's authentic. And when we can live out of our authenticity, it creates the ripples of joy and love and peace in the world. And that's part of, that strength and vulnerability. Thank you, Brené Brown. And so all these beautiful humans and doing this work for the collective. And now I'm awakening to that and realizing that I'm not alone. There's also an organization I found recently called the Order of the Sacred Earth. Check it out. Super excited about it. And that when we all link up and work together, we really are a lot stronger, and the impact is greater. A giant tidal wave is made up of many drops. And sometimes we have to cleanse things in our culture and create a new. It's like a gentle, loving paradigm shift versus like calling it a revolution, And to each their own. We're all going to do this in our own way, in our own flavors, with our own style. And just like looking at an astrology chart, for example, everybody's different, but there's a way to do it and to embrace that in a way that's reverent and respectful. So Megan Durney, she works at the Pfeiffer Center in New York and has been there since 2006. And that is where she has learned about and taught about biodynamic farming practices, and involved in preparation making, draft power, beekeeping, seed saving, intensive production gardening, and biodynamic education and training. This is also where the fellowship is, which is a leadership group that is creating community and an intergenerational community centered around the care of the elderly, integrating land and educational programs and new cooperative endeavors. So I think that's beautiful. And there's a lot of people in the world that have been working towards making these things happen for a long time. But again, because they're not always focused on profits, they don't always get the attention and the popularity that they may need or deserve. And so I'm here to be, I almost said a voice box. I'm here to be a voice. I'm here to speak for a lot of these things that I've learned about over the years, to help spread the teachings on both the soil and the soul level, so that we can reinvigorate and re-enrich our soil, our food, our lives, like our homes, our communities. As someone who's practiced since 2015 in the mental health field, and before that for years in education and the service industry as a waitress and a bartender, actually, I've seen a lot of people suffer. A lot of people suffering from physical, mental, emotional, relational health problems. And it's sad. And that's why a lot of us get into these service fields, because we care and we want to make the world a better place. Like, you know, it says a joy shared is a joy doubled, and a sorrow shared is a sorrow divided. And I just, for me, like, I want to see people thriving and healthy, and I want to live in a world that is working to provide for the basic needs, the basic human rights of all beings. And so we're going through that shift, and, you know, the more that each one of us does what we can do to contribute to that, even through the smallest acts of kindness, as well as, you know, by taking care of ourselves first so that we can give from a full cup in a healthy way. And so Megan and Deb are sharing about the biodynamic farming and how, through years of, I'm going to call it, these are my words, conquest-based paradigms, living practices, where people are murdered and enslaved, where land is stolen and raped, I would say, and just not really given back to or taken care of. I think that we're now collectively realizing and accepting that rapid change needs to happen. Another great thing to check out, I believe it's called One, and I'm going to post about it later. And the keynote speakers are Winona LaDuke, I believe Tempest Williams, and Rosemary Gladstar. And Winona LaDuke, I read one of her books, I believe it was called All Our Relations or All My Relations, years ago when I was an undergrad. And she talks about, you know, the seed diversity and the soil and the history of the Lakota people and all our relations. And if you're suffering, I'm suffering, right? We have this collective angst, and like in the mental health field, we see it with the rates of depression and anxiety, just those two things, over 50% of the population, right? And I said it before, and I'm going to say it again. I went to this conference once where there was a psychiatrist, you know, PhD leveled practitioner, and he started off the speech on how do we prescribe medications to people with co-occurring disorders, and he started off with, well, we know that these medications only work 50% of the time, and we know that the studies that say this were funded by the manufacturers that made these medications, right? But here's how we prescribe them. And then nobody said anything. Nobody asked, like, well, what else do we do? What else is there to do the other 50% of the time? So that's where these practices like meditation, yoga, healthy eating, I'm sorry, I get really passionate about that, because I've seen more people suffer at the hands of those kinds of pills than get better, right? And again, it's like, if you ever tried to take comfrey out of your garden, like those pills are like chopping the top off of comfrey and leaving the roots. And then people get frustrated, why am I not getting better? Why is it 20 years later and I'm still feel like, you know? And the list goes on. So here we are, here I am to spread my experience and my knowledge and plant these seeds of peace and love and passion and purpose for a better life, to regenerate life, to regenerate the planet, to regenerate ourselves. Thank you, Mr. Dennis, from Nature Summit. That really touched me deeply. How many of you have ever regenerated a plant from what you thought was totally lost? Right? just completely possible. And so we can put aside our differences as best as possible and find the higher ground, find the connection points, and find the deep compassion in our hearts for ourselves and for others. And gardening and working with the soil and taking care of the earth, whether you want to call it Mother Earth or non-gendered, is essential, and it's something that can bring all of us together. You could check out Sadhguru and his ride for the earth that he's doing to save soil right now in Europe. We're going to talk in Rome, I believe, tonight, and he talks about the sadhana essentials, and I appreciate that very much. And these people who have greater reach than me, like, I'm speaking to them for them to do what they can do, right? And maybe I'm just like the little lady in the back, like, hey, over here, right? But that's my, my 2 cents, I guess. And my part and my way of trying to get this wave going where I want to live in joy. I read this quote recently. I don't remember who said it, but thank you to whoever shared it with me, was that people will spend more time and more effort avoiding pain than pursuing pleasure. And I know that myself, I'm guilty of that, and thinking about denial and thinking about how to feel pleasure and to receive from the universe, from the Lord, or from whatever your belief is, even just to receive from a friend, you have to be open to that and soften and receptive and take it in, right? And for some people who've experienced trauma on different levels, that's really challenging. And so I really I'm an avid proponent for a supporter of earth-based, nature-based practices, embodied practices, somatosensory-based practices for healing trauma individually and collectively. And there's the softness and the connection that can come with getting our hands in the soil and learning about these relationships and learning about how to connect to the plants and to the subtle things on softer levels. And that process and that experience can help to soften, to slow down our systems and help us to feel safe again, so that we can be open and vulnerable and receptive and giving even. Trauma can affect both the giving and receiving. It affects the flow. Fear affects the flow. And so when we can cleanse our flow as individuals, we also add that cleansing in whatever way works best for us, to the universe. And we see this in the water studies again. It sounds simple. It's a full circle, right? Go back to origin of source, the water studies. When we can see the effect of negative versus positive energies on water molecules, it's like a no-brainer that how that then translates to everything else, right? And on that note, I'm going to say thank you for taking the time to listen to today's edition of Sacred Earth Essentials, where I believe the earth is sacred and you are too. And don't forget to check out those resources I mentioned and to go in peace and be a blessing. Bye.